Today we're going to talk about SPD, which is sensory processing disorder. In a way, this is not a incredibly complicated subject to kind of get the basic understanding of sensory processing disorder. First off, because what it sounds like, it's a difficulty in processing your sensory. Now, sensory is a specific nerve found in our body that gives us the recognition of what we're feeling. Touch, pain, cold, heat, vibration. These are all sensations that our body feels through a nerve called the sensory nerve. That's why it kind of has a lot of basic duh to it. When your child might have SPD or sensory processing disorder, we might kind of get a glimpse of what that might be just observing our child. So the real question comes in, is this serious? Is this something that could produce something more complicated? Is this something that I need to do something about, or is this something that my child will grow out of? We want to tell you that usually these conditions, even though I don't want to be alarming, you don't really grow out of them. You kind of grow into them, which means that the reaction to hypersensitivity might diminish with time. It does mean that other biological or neurological entities have had some consequences because of the overwhelming sensory processing disorder. Now, we've talked a lot about milestones, how our children go through these certain milestones. And keep in mind that the very end of this milestone, what we want as an adult, is really excellent cognitive or decision making and really excellent emotional processing. So we know really well how to work in our society and with other humans, especially spouses and family. So if you look at the full end of this equation, like what do I want to be an adult, these you want at literally no, or just say at maximum potential. So sensory processing in a child will really limit the potential of cognitive and emotional regulation as an adult. So for that reason, take care of it right away. How does it show up? Well, how it shows up in, let's say, like a 1-year-old or a 2-year-old in that thing is that sometimes they really won't have the awareness of how rough they are to pets or other kids. So they can sometimes be a little rough. Now, it doesn't mean their heart is bad. It certainly doesn't mean that they're, mean. It just means that they don't really know those parameters of what they're doing, how hard they're pushing, how hard they're hugging, these kind of things, super common. Another thing would be if you touch a child from the back and it's like a surprise touch and they really overreact. It just seems like you really shocked them or surprised them. That's another sign of SPD. Another one would be that they're just really hypersensitive. So they're very, very sensitive to criticism. They're very sensitive to kind of being told what to do, or they're very, very sensitive to just kind of what they perceive as judgment from either family or other children. I want you to know that this can be hyper exaggerated, that it really isn't judgment and it really isn't an offensive touch, but their body is receiving it to such an incredible higher level that it's causing disruption in their nervous system and of course in their personality and their body. So in sensory processing disorder, what we're really looking for is calm. If your child is calm, and if your child falls down, or if your child gets touched, or if your child gets surprised, we want a reaction to that. We just don't want it to be overreacting. So we don't want a child that hits their knee and cries for an hour. We don't want a child that gets touched and just jumps out of their skin, or we don't want a child that unfortunately may hug another pet or a child, if you will, and is a little too firm or aggressive on the children. These are kind of the highlights. Now, since sensory processing disorder is attached to milestones and developments, these children also are likely to be colicky. They're also likely to be fussy as babies, and they're also likely to be poor poopers. It kind of works in all the same neurological pathways. So if you have a 2-year-old or 3-year-old and you're curious about sensory processing disorder, if they have these other things from childhood, it could give us a hint that they might be an SPD. Another thing about SPD is that if you're an adolescent and you're now in school, if you're really overwhelmed, if your child just kind of just turns off school, starts like just not responding because it's too much, again, we're looking at sensory processing disorder. So it doesn't mean that the teacher or the classroom is overwhelming, it just means that it's overwhelming for that child. So we want to be able to absorb information, we want to be able to have touch, we want to be able to have function that is really appropriate in that zone of not too much or not too little. The challenge, my passion, if you will, for sensory processing disorder is not that your child, might hug a pet too hard or might jump out of their skin if you touch them. It really concerns me on their development. Really, how well are they going to grow up? And this is all the way from immunity to cognitive and emotional regulation. So this is a process that goes on literally into our early 20s, mid-20s even. And once we go past these milestones, well, first off, we can't repeat them. We've talked about that before. But if we don't really fully develop them, we're going to have a little bit of a deficit. And each milestone kind of needs the previous milestone to go to its potential. So sensory processing disorder has full ranges, just from over ticklish to over jumpy, all the way into autism. So autism is when your sensory processing system, it just doesn't have any filters, if you will. Right now, I'm in a room that has a little bit of background noise. There's even images of the cars going by in the street. There's, the air conditioner comes on or turns off, et cetera, and et cetera. If a child has autism, they can't just disconnect from that car driving by. They can't really disconnect from the sound that the air conditioner might make. Any kind of touch feels like a 10, not a 1 or a 2. So there's just the brain is not filtering these other sensations so that we can focus on what's most at hand. So right now it would be me communicating to you on a video. That would be the most important part of my time right now. If my body didn't allow me to not be distracted by other stimuli, I would just do this not as good. I'm trying to be as best I can, by the way. So that's when autism can go into a very, very aggressive problem. Then they don't really recognize their environment very well. They don't understand emotions. They don't understand communication. They don't understand touch. It can even be found easily in discoordination. So it really, because sensory is such a huge part of our neural anatomy, it can literally affect everything. I want you to remember that literally our brain is a giant sensory organ. I mean, that's kind of what it does. It perceives the environment in a moment, every single moment, constantly, 24/7. It takes that information, understands what's best for our physiology in the moment, and then directs the body to change that physiology so that you can adapt, heal, and restore. So, brain, sensory organ, adapting, healing, and restoration once it knows what to do. What happens if you have a poor sensory perception to you? How does that brain then know what to do? It's like a Mercedes running on 3 wheels. It's just not really at its potential. So we really want to make sure that our children reach their potential, and if they're very, very young and you have some of these curiosities or hallmarks on sensory, it's not just getting through the season where they're not rough with kids, or getting through the season where they're less irritable, they're more irritable, or they're difficult to talk to. I know we got to get through those seasons, but it really is more intentionally on their potential and their growth, certainly as they get to adulthood. So thank you for your time today. My name is Dr. Jim Rolls here at Five Parks Chiropractic. In the comments on this video, I'm also going to introduce you to the PX doctors in Illinois, and they have another video on this exact same subject. So why don't you go ahead and watch that one too. Have a blessed day.